Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked, here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Today, hour number one, we're going to talk about taxes and saving you money. And hour number two, Bert's going to be with us. And we're going to be talking about coronal mass ejections, EMPs, the Carrington event, things like that. And so for this hour, I'd like to suggest that, well, don't believe anything that we say or anything that anyone else says in the media. Do your own research and make up your own mind. I'm not a CPA. I have taken classes in accounting. I've taken classes in finance. The university, I have two universities have certified me as understanding the material, and I've been able to regurgitate it to the point where they say, okay, you pass. And I've got two sheepskins that say that I've done all the things that they've required of me to get those two sheepskins. One's a bachelor's level in finance and economics, and the other is a master's degree in finance and economics. But my information is pretty old. So if you think about it, my last degree was in 1978, 88, 98, 08, 18, 43 years ago, is my latest, experience in classroom activities regarding finance and economics. So some of what I'm going to say is old school. Some of it is, information that just makes common sense. And some of it's based on the tax code as I understand it. Kyle's with me today. Welcome, Kyle.
Good morning, Vince.
Good morning. And so, you've had a business in the past, so you understand what preparing taxes is like. And I just want to say that I don't enjoy it. I really do not enjoy spending my time and Mrs. Finelli's time and our children's time preparing taxes because the government says you're going to do this. Some people don't have to, by the tax code. Some people do. And, we're in the class where they require us to do it. Now, some people will say you don't have to pay taxes. It's voluntary. Well, if you try not paying taxes, sometimes, it has ramifications that are really unpleasant. And some people cheat on their taxes, and I'm not going to recommend anyone do that. I don't do it, and I don't recommend that anyone cheats on his or her taxes. We use the tax code. We play by their rules, and I'll tell you what the rules are. If you want, you can download for free a copy of the condensed version of the tax rules for most people. It's called Publication 17. Publication 17. So you can just go to your favorite search engine, type in IRS space PUB as in pub, short for publication, space 17 as in 17. Hit enter, and you'll be able to download the PDF of the Publication 17, which is the condensed 130-something page current version of the 2020 tax rules. And you can read them, and you'll probably be grinning from ear to ear when you figure out that you can take deductions that you didn't think you could take, or didn't know you could take. So, Kyle, I looked up before the broadcast, what percentage of Americans prepare their own taxes? And I was surprised because I don't think this number's right. The number is 33%. Of Americans say they do their own taxes. 56 say that someone else prepares their taxes. I don't think those numbers are right. I think fewer people prepare their own and more people have someone else do it. What are your thoughts? You have a rough feel for that?
Yeah, out of 5 kids, as an example, I've got one daughter that actually prepares her own taxes, and the rest of them all get it done. It's, Vince, I think part of it is, especially like 2 of my son-in-laws have their own businesses, and my son works for a huge business. So it's like those guys are so busy. My son will keep some receipts. Thank God. He's finally got to where he's keeping receipts because he sees this big, huge tax hike coming. And he didn't enjoy paying taxes so bad last year, so he is keeping a lot more receipts. But he turns it over to somebody else. They don't want to take the time. None of my other 2 son-in-laws that run businesses, neither one of them really want to take the time to prepare their own taxes. They're working from, 7 o'clock in the morning now till 7, 8 o'clock at night sometimes. And so they really just don't want to take that time.
Okay. And so I have given seminars across the country from the Mississippi east at conventions, and I've talked about, taxes and preparing your own taxes and why you should and so forth. And I've done it on the air as well. And the result that I get when I start the seminar, I'm talking about an in-person seminar, lots of people in the room, I'll mention, how many of you do your own taxes? Raise your hands. And it's more like 10%. Maybe a high of 20%. Maybe. Okay. And I think that's really closer to the number. Now, maybe what I'm saying is skewed because these are people going to preparedness type conventions and maybe they're a little special breed. I don't know. But it's not, I've never seen, a third of the room's hands go up. I've never seen that. And the answer, and the next question I ask, and this is in the beginning of the seminars, why? Why don't you do your own taxes? And the answer is always the same. It's too complicated and takes too much time. Those are the 2 answers. Does that jive with what you think, Kyle?
Oh, yeah. I think that's absolutely true. I've wondered this for many, 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 many years. I don't know why we never ever, and why people haven't demanded, the fact that you've got run all taxes sort of like a corporation does. Take your living expenses out, how much money you made, what's your living expenses, and be able to put that down, as a general rule. You've got this X amount left over, and then you pay 10% of that. And that's just the way it would be. To me, that would be really quick and easy. If you're, and depends on what you're going to allow for expenses, but that always could be very simple or it could be very complicated. But I've never understood why they didn't go ahead and just institute some kind of a, flat tax, something along those lines, or even just take your income. You made $50,000 this year. And you just write out a check for $5,000 and you're done. I don't know why they don't do that. Well, I do know they want control. It's like one time, Vince, I heard an Indian guy who was in a reservation, and he was head of the reservation, and they were interviewing him on, I think it was 2020 or 60 Minutes or one of them shows a long time ago. And they asked him, they said, you guys are having all of this struggle constantly here with the federal government, and you wouldn't have all this struggle if you guys just, why don't you just dissolve the reservation and come on and join the country and pay taxes like the rest of us? And that guy told that interviewer, he said, the ability to tax is the ability to control. And he said we would never do that.
Okay, couple comments based on what you've just said. There's a company called Intuit, and they make a product, or they used to make a product called TurboTax. And you could get it at the Chinese factory outlet or Sam's Club. You could get it on the internet. And it would help you, allegedly, prepare your taxes. And you type in the deductions, you fill out the lines and the boxes, and you hit, calculate, and boom, it tells you how much you owe, and you hit print, and it prints it for you, sign it, send your check off to the IRS. And it's allegedly simple. Well, it's not simple. Because the devil is in the details. That's one thing. Now, the Intuit people, the TurboTax people, have reportedly lobbied Congress to keep the tax laws complex. Why? Because they'd be out of business with the model that you've just suggested. Flat tax or fair tax. So they'd be out of business. The tax accountants would be out of business. A lot of CPAs would be out of business. The tax preparing people would be out of business. All right? So that's one comment. Another comment is that tax laws favor, and this is very important, class, because this is the basis of today's class. Tax laws favor two groups of people: business owners and landowners. Now, that's not published in places. That's my opinion. Tax laws favor business owners and landowners. So let me ask Kyle. Kyle, of all the people you know, and you and I have never even physically met. I've never met anyone in your family that I know of. Of all the people that you know of, would you say that people who are employees are better off, or people who own businesses are better off?
Businesses by far.
Right. So, and that's because the tax laws favor business owners and landowners. Okay. So, and the ideal situation, in my opinion, is being a farmer, because that's both. That's business and land. And that's my opinion. Now, it took me a long time to figure this out. I didn't figure this out till like 1989. That's a long time for me to, get smart or smarter. So here are some thoughts. Now, class, as I mentioned, I'm not a CPA, and this is not tax advice. Consider this only one thing: food for thought. So in your mind, class, if you think about all the people you know who are better off, business owners or employees, okay? And you're going to come up with the same thing that Kyle and I have come up with. Business owners are better off. Now, the reason that they're better off is they can take advantage of the tax laws. Whether they hire somebody to do it for them or whether they learn it themselves, that is the reason why they're better off, because the tax laws favor them. Now, if you want to follow one of the themes of today's class, you will download a copy of Publication 17, IRS Pub 17, and you'll read the condensed version, 130-something pages of the tax code, what you can and can't do. And when you read that, you will know not as much as the person who prepares taxes, but almost as much. And if you know the rules, you will be able to play by the rules, which means that if you're going to play baseball, after school, would you play that game without knowing the rules? Would you really do that? Would you get up to bat and then he said, that guy's throwing a ball at me? Why is he doing that? I mean, why do I have to take this club? I mean, what's that for? You want me? Okay, so he throws the ball, I hit the ball, then what do I do? Oh, okay, I run over there, then what? Okay, would you do that? Obviously not. You want to know the rules. Same thing with taxes. Be right back. Kyle's with me, and we're talking about businesses and taxes and why you should prepare your own taxes. If you do not prepare your own taxes, you are at a tremendous disadvantage. You are playing a game where an entity has their hands in your pockets and you don't know the rules. Okay? And I can prove this to you. So if you have a job and you think that the government is not interested in taking your money from you, just try to have your payroll deduction stopped. Just try it. You will not be able to. The government and your employer has an agreement. They have a contract where the government has your employer take money out of your paycheck before you get it. Before you get it. And then you have to claw your way to get some of it back. or claw your way not to pay more. So they have their hands in your pockets. Now, if you read the government's website, they encourage you, I'm talking about the IRS, they encourage you to learn the tax code and to take advantage of the deductions. They encourage you to do that. And since they encourage you, why not? So here's a simple example. So many years ago, I wanted to buy motor oil and lubricants for the farm. Now, farmers don't pay taxes on supplies that are used in the direct production of that farm operation. So, for example, motor oil for the tractors is not taxable. It's sales tax exempt. Makes sense, right? Well, lots of things that farmers buy are sales tax exempt. So I went to this store and I loaded up one of those gondolas, and I had, let's say, 50 quarts of oil. And some of it was tractor hydraulic fluid. Some of it was 5W30 engine oil. Some of it was straight SAE 30 engine oil. And some of it was 15W40 engine oil. And I went to the cashier, and we were already registered with them as a tax-exempt farm. And I said, we're tax-exempt. She says, okay, what's your name? I give her my name. She looks it up. Sure enough, we're there. The farm's there. We're tax-exempt. She goes to ring it up, and the 15W40 diesel engine oil is tax-exempt. The tractor hydraulic fluid is tax-exempt. The SAE 30 engine oil is not tax-exempt. The 5W30 engine oil is not tax-exempt. I said, well, wait a minute, hold it. What? She said, well, you see, you could use that 5W30 in the car. I said, yeah. And she said you could use this SAE 30 in a car, a gasoline engine, and so we're not going to let you have that purchase be tax exempt. But the 15W40, that's diesel engine oil, and you probably are using that on the farm. Now, the logic here is flawed, because 15W40 will work fine in a gasoline engine. And some farm equipment, gasoline-powered equipment, uses 5W30 or SAE 30. So what I'm saying is this particular store has been pressured by the state of Missouri to charge me tax for oil that I'm going to use for the farm. 5W30 and SAE 30. So they say because I could use this in a car, they're going to tax me for it, whether I use it in a car or not. I have a problem with that. So since that's the way they play the game, I decide whether I'm going to pay tax on it or not based on its use. So if I buy motor oil that is used in a car, I pay tax on it. If I buy motor oil that's not used for a car, it's used on the farm, I don't pay tax on it. But they taught me that lesson. Kyle, do you have any comments about that?
Well, how would they know that your car's not being used for farm business, even if it is?
That's correct.
Practically,
that's correct. And
I was raised on a farm. Anything that goes on practically is to support and run the farm.
That's exactly right. Now, according to the tax rules, I can, for a vehicle that's used for farm purposes, I can do one of two things. I can take a per mile deduction, 57.5 cents a mile for 2020, or I can use the actual cost. I can say, well, I'm paying X amount for the gasoline, X amount for fan belts, tires, add all that up, and the depreciation for the vehicle, and I can use it that way. I can pick one, but I can't change once I pick it. We'll be right back. I'm delighted to be broadcasting with Kyle, and we're talking about taxes. So, class, if you have a business, you can deduct expenses that are incurred with operating that business. Legitimate expenses. So in the case of having an automobile, you can do one of two things. You can take a per mile deduction of 57.5 cents for the year 2020 tax year, or you can do the actual cost. You can say, okay, so what I spend in depreciation. So you take that vehicle and you say, well, let's depreciate it over 7 years or whatever the current time frame is that according to the IRS. You say 1/7 of the cost of that vehicle is used as depreciation, but I put tires on it and a fan belt and coolant and, change the oil. And so all those actual costs add up. So if that's a farm truck and you only use it for farm purposes or business purposes, even that motor oil that they would not let me have tax-free is tax exempt for the farm. Okay. So we have gasoline powered equipment here at the farm that uses SAE 30 engine oil and 5W30 engine oil. For example, riding lawnmowers that are gas powered that we use for trimming the farm, trimming under the fence, and push mowers and self-propelled mowers and chainsaws and gasoline powered generators, rototillers, etc. Farm equipment that's used for the farm. Okay. We have a pump that pumps pond water, a large volume pump that pumps pond water, and it's gasoline powered. So, and it uses 5W30 or 30 SAE 30 engine oil. The point is that store has no idea what I'm going to do with that oil, but they're going to tell me that it's not tax exempt because they feel that I could use it in a automobile that's not used for the farm. All right. So what I do is I make the decisions. And as to what I'm going to use it for. So if it's personal use, I'll pay tax on it. If it's for the farm, I won't. Now, having a farm is probably the best business you can have because so many things are tax deductible. So, for example, if you want to buy a four-wheeler that you use exclusively for the farm, you can buy that as a tax deduction. And the oil and the gasoline that goes with it. Now, if you're just going to put that on a trailer and go, at some off-site four-wheeling, that's not a tax deduction for the farm. But if it's used exclusively for the farm, it is. Okay. So is a dirt bike if you use a dirt bike for the farm. And we do, because we'll take a dirt bike out, and it's like 30 years old or more. We'll take an old dirt bike out that we bought used, and we'll go and check the fence line. Why? Because if I want to check the fence line, if I want to walk it, and I start at 8 o'clock in the morning, I won't get back till dinner time. But I can hop on a dirt bike and go through the woods, and because some of our fence is through the woods, like miles of it through the woods. Okay. So it's a tool, just like a screwdriver or a hammer or a saw. It's a tool for the farm. Kyle, any comments?
Yeah, I agree, Vince. I've taken dirt bikes a long time ago when I worked on a farm, and one of our jobs was to run the fence, and then you'd also check on all the irrigation lines that were running at the time. The place I was working was about 5,000 acres, and that was part of our job once in a while was to take the dirt bikes out and check things around that he wanted done.
Yeah,
I've got a question for you.
Sure.
I've got a question for you, Vince, though.
Sure.
On dealing with taxes like that, do you find that the 57.5 cents is more lucrative toward you than writing off oil and stuff like that? And if you do the 57.5 cents per mile of because you have quite a few vehicles, does that apply to all of the vehicles? Or can you just say on this, or say these three vehicles are going to be used per mile and the rest of them are going to be a deduction based on depreciation and use or cost? Yeah.
My understanding is you have to make that election, and you can't change it. Now, I don't know if you have 10 vehicles, whether 5 of them can be the actual cost and the other 5 could be per mile. I don't know. I would imagine, I would certainly do the research before making this decision. But for us, I like the 50, whatever it happens to be. Sometimes it changes every year. Right now it's 57.5 cents per mile. But if I'm going to town and I'm going to pick up, let's say, feed for the animals, or I'm going to, the big city to pick up lumber, for example, for the farm. I like the idea that I can just say, write down in my log, here's where I went, here's the mileage, and here's why I went there, and that I have receipts for it. And I even write down the receipts, what it was for. So not only is what I bought tax deductible, but the trip is, and I like the 57.5 cents per mile this year, this taxable or 2020 taxable year, because it's easier for me. Now I can take that same vehicle and I can use it for personal use. If I want to go on vacation, which I've never done, but if I wanted to do that, I could use that same vehicle. So it gives me the flexibility. And is it advantageous in terms of flexibility? Yes. In terms of ease of calculation? Yes. So I like the per mile deduction, and that just works for me. Now, I don't buy expensive cars. Well, actually I do. I buy very expensive cars, but I pay less than the original owner paid in taxes, sales tax for that vehicle. So, I have nicely made vehicles, but they're old. And I pay like 5% or 10% of what the original sticker price was. But, so because of that, and because I didn't pay a lot for the vehicles, I think the 57.5 cents per mile is the best for me. Okay. So if I had a little puddle jumper, a little, Ford Focus or something, you're certainly better off with the per mile allowance of 57.5 cents. Because they don't use much fuel compared to, a big, 8-cylinder truck. But, so that brings us to, what is tax deductible? Now, according to the IRS, publication 17, if you have a business, you can deduct part of your home. Now, what does it take to have a business? Well, you say, I'm in business. Now you're done. You've just started your business. Now, some localities want you to register, and pay a license fee to have the privilege of having your business. I don't have a license. I do not have a license to have the farm. And I don't need one. And I'm not going to get one. Now, it's recommended that I have one, but why would I want to do that? Why would I want to pay $25 a year to the government for the privilege of doing what I can do without paying them $25 a year? So I don't have a business license. And how did I start my business? I said, I'm in business. It's as simple as that. So if you decide you're in business, you can probably do it that way. Now, you need to check your local tax laws and local governing laws to see if you can do it that way, but you probably can. So you can have your home-based business. And what does that do for you? Well, let's say you have a typical, we'll call it a house that has a kitchen, a living room, dining room, and 2 bedrooms. That's 5 rooms. Okay. And then you have bathrooms. So you'd say that's a 5-room house. Now, if you dedicate one of those rooms to your home-based business, you can deduct 1/5 of that, of the housing expense for that business. Now, you have to exclusively use that room for the business. So it can't be the living room where you watch TV and you have some friends over every once in a while and once infrequently you use it or you have a desk in a corner. That won't qualify. You have to have an exclusive regular use of that room. Now, it can be a bedroom that you have a desk and, whatever equipment you need for your business in, but it has to be regular and exclusive use. And we do. So we have exclusive rooms that we use in our farmhouse for our business. I have an exclusive room that I use for the broadcast. So I can deduct that percentage. Now, you can do it 2 ways. You can say, well, I've got 5 rooms. 1 room is being used for the business. So that's 20%. 20% of the mortgage, 20% of the real estate taxes, 20% of the roof repair, okay? 20% of whatever maintenance that you have on that house, 20% of the hot water repair cost, replacement cost, those kinds of things. That's a great way to go, right? And what else? 20% of the electricity, 20% of the heat, okay? 20% of the water bill. Now, what if you paint that room? So let's say it was that unused room and it's kind of lying there and it's kind of shabby and you really want to spruce it up. Well, whose choice is it to spruce it up? Is it yours or the IRS's? It's yours. So you decide that you want to paint it a nice light, let's say white. Doesn't matter. You can paint any color you want. But let's say you want to change the color to white because you want it bright for the office. The cost of that paint is tax deductible. Now, if you hire somebody to do it, that's tax deductible. If you buy a drop cloth to do it, that's tax deductible. If you buy masking tape so that you do a nice, neat job and you don't paint the floor, that's tax deductible. and the paintbrushes. And then if you decide that you want to have better lighting because you have that, small light in the ceiling and you want to have, a nice fluorescent light, and you found one at a yard sale or a garage sale, and you buy that for $10 or $20 or $3, that's tax deductible if you use it in the office. Kyle, any comments?
Well, I was wondering, Vince, if you paint that yourself, you can't deduct your labor, can you? Or can you? If you had another business, you can't deduct that.
No. But if you hire the neighbor's child and you say, I see you pretty good in painting. I saw what you did for your parents' house on the outside. I got this room. Would you consider painting it for me? And what would you want for it? And the guy said, I'll do it for $50 or $100 or $200, whatever it is. If you agree on it, then that payment for labor is tax deductible, but you can't pay yourself. No.
Okay. Just curious.
Now, and here's another example. So let's say, you buy a new sofa and you put it in the living room and you've got a job as a realtor. And every once in a while you bring somebody over and you say, hey, let's talk about these houses. Let's flip through the screens and we'll look at properties together. Let's say it's more convenient for you as a realtor to do it at your home rather than at the office. So you've got this person sitting on the sofa and you want to have a new sofa for that purpose, nice new shiny sofa. Can you deduct that? No, because it's not exclusive use and it's not regular use. But if you put that sofa in your office, that same sofa, if you put it in your office and you used your office for business exclusively and regularly, and you brought your client or clients in there and you had them sit on the sofa while you're discussing the transactions, then it is deductible according to the rules that I've read by the IRS. So that's the same sofa. In one use, it's deductible, and the other it's not. Just like the motor oil that I talked about. It's how you're going to use it. So if you know the rules, you can play by the rules and you can save a lot of money. So for example, if I go to town, and I'm going to pick up something for the farm, that's tax deductible. That trip at 57.5 cents per mile is tax deductible. But if I go to buy food at the Chinese factory outlet and I say, while I'm there, let's get this item for the farm, then it's not tax deductible. But if I go and my purpose is to get something for the farm, that one item, and I say, while I'm there, let's get some food, then it is tax deductible. The acreage that you need to have a farm. I don't know. I've read 5 acres. I've read 4 acres. Some people have Christmas tree farms on just a couple acres. Is it a farm? Well, if you plant Christmas trees and your plan is to sell them at Christmas time, sounds like a farm to me. And, there's not a lot of cost involved in it. There's certainly, you plant the trees and you tend them, and you cut them and you sell them. But, it's not like raising animals and, it's easier to have a Christmas tree farm. But to me, that would be a farm. And so if you raise animals or you raise products, on land and you want to be a farm, sounds like a farm to me. And the expenses and the cost of, materials, maintenance, etc., are related to that farm. If they are, then they are tax deductible according to what I have read. Now don't go by what I'm saying. Do your own research. So what about for that home office? The extension cords, the computer, are they tax deductible? Of course. But if the computer is going to last more than a year, then you would depreciate it over roughly 7 years. That's what the IRS wants you to do. So you take the cost of it, you divide it by 7, and you apply that prorated for each year. So you take 1/7 of it, for the first year, 1/7 of it for the second year. And they have, when you actually put it in service, there's some rules for that, and you have to look them up. But the idea is they don't want you to buy large items and take them as expenses in 1 year. So, but what if you do what I do? And, I bought 7 computers for $350. That's computers, monitors, etc. All shipped for $350. Now, do I depreciate those? Well, I'm supposed to. Okay. And so I would depreciate them over 7 years. But what if I say one of them I'm going to cannibalize for parts? to keep the other 6 running. Well, then if I'm going to cannibalize that and I'm not using it as a computer and I bought it for parts, well, then that $50 cost for that particular used computer, I would say is maintenance or repairs, or I would expense it. That's what I would do. But that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, and I would have to defend that. So everything that I do, I write down exactly why I do it. I write it in the margins of publication 17, or I write it right on the tax form. I write all over the tax forms. I write why I did what I did. So if the IRS wants to look at why I did it, it's right there on the form. Or if they call me in for an audit, I pull out my publication 17 that I wrote all over, and I say, hold it, let me look it up. I've got it right here. I'll tell you why I did that. Now, anything that you do, you need to be prepared to defend it. Now, how does that contrast with hiring someone? You know, going to the Chinese factory outlet and going to one of those little cubicles where they have 2 seats and it's like 8 square feet and you're all jammed in there and that guy's preparing your taxes. And do you think that if you get audited, they're going to help you? Do you think so? Or are you going to be on your own? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that if I read publication 17, I prepare my own taxes, and that's when I prepare for my audit while I'm doing my taxes. Because I'm not going to put down anything that I can't defend. But if I get audited, it's no big deal. Actually, I look at it as a challenge. It's war. They want my money, and I'm not going to let them have it. Unless I made a mistake, by interpreting the tax law. And there's plenty of room for interpretation. Because I've met with auditors, tax auditors, IRS auditors, and they say, why'd you do that? And I go, here's why I did it. Here's what your publication 17 says. And here's why I did it, because I have it written here in the margin. And they go, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So that's how I do it. Kyle, what are your thoughts about being audited and having done your taxes in preparation for the audit, rather than having hired somebody to do it?
Always wise to be prepared, Vince. But I have a question for you. So I've heard, we've talked before, and you've had to make trips of 200-300 miles sometimes to get equipment or something for the farm. So if you go say 300 miles, and you're pulling the trailer, so you deduct the 57.5 cents on your truck. Can you deduct 57.5 cents on the trailer as well? And if you buy fuel in that trip, is that deductible?
The answer is no, according to my understanding. So I've already bought the trailer, and I already have that as a farm deduction through depreciation, right? So I take that trailer, and let's say I paid $700 for it. I depreciated over 7 years. So I already have the trailer depreciated. So I can't take the deduction twice. So I'm pulling the trailer with a truck that I'm using at 57.5 cents a mile. In that 57.5 cents a mile is bundled in the cost of the fuel. So I can't add fuel on top of what I'm already getting a deduction for. So the answer is no, you can't add the fuel, can't add any extra oil. But if I have, let's say I buy some extra tie-down straps to hold down let's say I'm going to buy a tractor and it'll fit on this trailer. And I need some extra tie-down straps, that is deductible, okay, as an expense. Now let's say I go to Ohio from Missouri, and I'm going to buy this tractor. I look at it on Craigslist. I talk to the guy. We agree on the price and all that. And I hook up the trailer. I say, I'll meet you at 2:00 on Tuesday. And I go there, and it's not what I thought. It's not as described. And I go, I'm not buying it because it's not what we agreed on. You lied. Now I come back without the tractor. Is that trip deductible? In my opinion, absolutely. Because in good faith, I went to buy it. And it was an expense. It was a bona fide expense. But the transaction wasn't completed. Kyle, thank you so much for being with me. And you've had some great questions. Bert's with us. Welcome, Bert.
Glad to be here again, Vince. Hope everything's going well.
Yeah. Hey, hour number 1, Bert, we were talking about taxes. And for as long as you've known me, I've been preparing my own taxes. And darn close to 50 years now that we've known each other. And do you do your own taxes?
I do, but it's a combination because, I have, various different issues and things that, I want to deal with a little at a time, so I hate to just turn something over. But I do seek advice because, the tax law is so doggone complicated these days that, you can't do it without seeking advice of a good accountant.
Well, I do. But my life is a little less complicated than yours because, I don't have, I only have one corporation, currently, and, it's a farm and radio broadcast, but actually they're separate, but I've got a couple companies, but, I prepare my own taxes, but it's a little different because tax laws in California are pretty darn complicated and they change early and often. And it's got to be a real challenge there, especially with securities involved and, corporate governance, etc. Is that the issue?
Well, we do have the burden of state taxes, but the good news is it generally conforms to the same federal guidelines. You know who I feel sorry for is, any of our listeners who reside in New York City, where you have to deal with federal tax, state tax, and a city tax. And you know that they'll get you, if you live on Long Island, which is not part of New York City, they'll hit you with New York City tax if you have clients or any type of business that relates to New York City. They'll still come after you for New York City tax. So it's so gosh darn complicated for a lot of New York residents. And, I mean, that's the least of what they face these days, and no wonder why, we hear about so many people leaving New York for Florida. And I don't know, are you getting people over in your neck of the woods that are fleeing some of these over-regulated, very complex and many cases overtaxed cities and states? Not really. And I think I know the reason why. When we were moving from Virginia to Missouri, there was a young man, he was in college, and he said, I'm looking forward to coming to visit you out there in Missouri as soon as I figure out where it is. So, Missouri is it's still the Wild West. It doesn't make the news very often, and not much happening here other than St. Louis and Kansas City, with high murder rates. But other than that, most of the state is kind of rural, and people don't know where it is, and it's way too hard. It's way too hard to live here compared to a big city. If you want to have it done, you're going to have to learn how to do it yourself if you live in rural Missouri. So, even there's no sidewalk in our little hamlet. There are no streetlights. There are no sidewalks. There's no. Our little hamlet doesn't even have a mayor, or it's unincorporated. So we kind of run it ourselves. It's really kind of nice. So we're on our own. So no, we're not it's not like, Montana where people are moving from California, to escape the high taxes. So it's not like that. They're not coming this far, and they're not coming this far, from the East Coast either. So fortunately, we're too far from everything to have the influx of people who want services. And as a matter of fact, the people who govern the county, they don't like the thought of Californians moving here, or people especially from California, because they say if they think you're from California, they believe that you want all kinds of services and you're used to paying for them. And the people here don't want to pay for those services. They don't want sidewalks. They don't want streetlights. They don't want county governments. They don't want the taxes that go with it, because they've realized here that if you have government services, the government, it costs a fortune for those services. They're not free. You pay for it in their taxes. So people don't want it here. So fortunately, we don't have this influx of people who are demanding services. So, Vince,
yeah.
Yeah, I heard a story, and you can tell me if there's any truth to this, that many years ago when you and Mrs. Finelli were living on the East Coast and you were thinking of getting out of there, that you laid out a map of the United States on your coffee table and got out a compass and tried to sketch where you could be furthest from any coast in the country. And as you ran the compass around in its semicircles, you came up with the Ozarks in Missouri. Is there any truth to that story?
Sort of. Let me say it this way. Here's what we did. We looked at a map of the United States, and we looked at where the nuclear reactors were. We looked at where the major pollution centers were. We looked at the major population centers. We looked at the tax rates. We looked at the distance between people. We looked at population density. We looked at weather patterns. We looked at soil conditions. We looked at crime rates. We looked at government help, meaning, how many government buildings and offices and employees are there in that specific area that we'd have to pay for. So we looked at all those things. And we found that Missouri was probably, for us, it was the best. Now, North Dakota would have been perfect, except for the weather. Okay? So North Dakota is freezing cold. So that kind of lets out North Dakota. So second best would be Missouri, in our opinion. And we picked an area that had lots of farms that were run down, and lots of people who were interested in freedom. We were looking for the absence of sidewalks, the absence of electric power substations, the absence of high tension power lines, the absence of cell phone towers, the absence of smokestacks, all kinds of smokestacks, factory smokestacks, power generation smokestacks, all of those, clean air, clean water, low taxes, freedom, all of those things went into the equation. And we found this little area in Missouri that was kind of perfect for us. And as a matter of fact, land was relatively inexpensive at that time. But, it's not the kind of land that you can put a plow down in and start plowing up and raising corn. In some places you can, but in the county that we're in, but it's really rocky. So you've got to have a plow that can handle, bowling ball size rocks, at the minimum, if you're going to try to plow it. So, there's, along with land that is really not great, cropland, comes with lower cost of land and lower taxes. So I like the idea of lower taxes. I really do. And I like the idea of freedom. So that's why we're here.
So I think we can say you used a real world compass.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, maybe the word would be compi, many compasses, right?
I think so. Mm-hmm. Well, so want to set the stage for what we're going to talk about the rest of the hour. Can you imagine if we knew there was going to be a major earthquake in a part of the country or some huge, terrible event, and we knew for certain this was going to occur? We knew for certain this will happen. And don't you think that the country would want to prepare for it as best it could to be ready when it struck, with everything we could do to counteract the effects that it would do on society and the country, the infrastructure, everything that we had? Doesn't that sound logical that we would prepare for it?
Yeah, and I can tell you for certain, I have lived through a 5.7 earthquake when Mrs. Finelli and I were in California in 1980, and the house we were in shook. Our Alaskan Malamute was terrified. He never jumped in the bed, but he did that time. The walls were shaking, the china was shaking in the cabinets, and it's really unsettling because you don't know, are you better off inside? Or what about if you step outside? Is the earth going to open up right there where you're standing? You don't know. So it's terrifying, and there was all kinds of damage. All kinds of damage. That was only 5.7.
Yeah,
so yeah, I would prepare. Absolutely.
Yeah, 5.7, just to let you know, that's considered medium, moderate. I've lived through a 7.2, or, it's been rated anywhere from 6.9 to 7.2, and that was the earthquake that we had here in 1989, I believe, during the World Series.
Okay, and was it terrifying? I bet you it was.
You know what? It wasn't, actually. I was in my car, and I thought I had car problems because the car was going back and forth. I go, is this my axle or what? So I pulled over. Then I noticed everyone else pulled over. And the lady in front of me says, "Oh, you saw my car. Thank you for pulling over for me." Then it hit me that when I saw like 30 other cars all pulled over, that this was not, 30 cars having car problems. It was an earthquake. And then I could look over and literally see the highway spiraling, moving slow, kind of in a sinusoidal pattern. So, but actually, it wasn't terrifying. My house held up fairly well. Unfortunately, some places didn't. We had a freeway collapse in Oakland, if you remember. We had part of San Francisco that was built on landfill literally collapsed, liquefied, and what got it then was gas fires, because your natural gas line to your water heater, I don't know if this is something you've talked about in the past, how dangerous it is, because you got a pilot light going all the time, and then any break in that gas line starts a fire. Fortunately, the new tankless heaters don't have a pilot light. They click on, so they're much safer. But that started so many fires. That probably caused as much damage as anything, just, water heaters catching on fire.
And I know that in California, when we live there, building codes required something that is absolutely not required in the East Coast or here in Missouri that I know of, and that is that water heaters do not have to be strapped to the structure. So, for example, if you have a water heater in your garage, and a lot of them in California have water heaters in the garages, or even outside the house, hot water heaters outside the house strapped to the building, so that if there is an earthquake, they don't just fall over. So it's a real problem.
Yeah, we have to strap them to the frame. So I'm setting the stage. Right. So that said, let me say we do know. So a little different event, but potentially as bad or even worse. We know for certain we will be hit by another solar storm. And that's what I want to talk about next. We know it's coming. We know when the last large one hit the Earth and about approximately how often they occur. So we're going to talk about that when we come back.
Bert's with us, and he's an electrical and electronic engineer patent holder. Bert's with us, a senior science instructor, and we're talking about the effects of the solar storms, possibly, if we have time, climate change and effects from the sun and our solar system. Bert, back to you.
So we absolutely know that a solar storm will come and will have very catastrophic effects on the Earth. So let's talk about the storm, which I think you know about, from 1859, otherwise known as the Carrington event. And I know we've talked about it before, and what I want to do is put it in the context of preparedness and natural disasters that occur from time to time that, in most cases, we have no control over. They just happen. We can't control earthquakes, and we certainly cannot control solar storms. So in 1859, pretty much the most extreme storm that we've been able to, categorize in history occurred, and it was so strong that telegraph operators were knocked off their chairs and electrocuted. Now, picture 1859. We had no radio. Telephone was being invented, but we didn't have it. We had certainly no type of electrical circuits other than relays and coils and some early transformers. And we had batteries and we had some very primitive power sources. But telegraph was really the most advanced electrical technology that we had. And the storm was so strong in its effect on the planet that the telegraph wire, which is just a single strand usually working with the ground as a second return path, sometimes it can be two conductors, but usually just one. And that telegraph picked up the energy from the solar storm, zapped people. Nobody lost their life, but they were electrocuted. It also hit railroad lines, not the telegraph lines over that followed the railroad, but the actual rails that the trains travel on picked up this energy and were warped. in that they couldn't use them until they were repaired. Could you imagine the level of energy required to literally warp a train rail? So just to put it in perspective how strong the effects were. There were no deaths that we know of, but the effect on very primitive electrical systems we had then gives us an kind of a indication of what it would do to modern planet Earth with all the electronics and electrical systems. And in particular, the concern is our electrical grid. And that's really the number one concern of scientists that are trying to warn of this danger and the looming problem. And again, not to scare people, but we know absolutely this will occur again because they occur regularly. They occur. We had one in 1903, 1909, 1921, 1946, and so on. Now, not yet as strong as 1859, but we have had some that got close. And as we make progress on the Earth in terms of our infrastructure and electronics and electrical system, we're only more susceptible to these problems from storms from the sun.
Well, I talked about this before, and I ran for a board of directors position at a local electric cooperative, and I ran 4 times over a 5-year period. And during one of those presentations I had, they only let me talk for a couple minutes. I gave a presentation on this exact thing. And do you know I was laughed at? The people thought I was just absolutely nuts, that we need to be concerned about the Carrington event, another one. Because my understanding is that they happen roughly every 75 years or so, and we're overdue. Is that right, Bert?
Well, we can go over the schedule, but I think for a very severe storm, we are absolutely overdue.
Yeah, there you have it. So if we have one of these things, class, we are, well, I'll let Bert tell you. And when we come back, Bert, how are we prepared? And what's the schedule like? We'll be right back with Bertonis, Senior USA Prepared Science Instructor. Bert's with us. Bert, so what's the schedule look like for the next Carrington-type event, next solar superstorm?
Sure. Well, it depends how you calculate it. And honestly, we don't know, is there a schedule that actually so many years have to tick off, or is it just totally random? In other words, it looks like, let's say every 50 years or every 60 years or whatever. Or is it just that, when you randomly shuffle something, that just seems to be how it comes up? We don't know. But what we do know is they're more likely to occur during solar maximum. So let's talk about that. The solar cycle has an 11-year period where eruptions and emissions from the sun, and I'm not talking about the sunlight that we all, get our warmth from, but other storms that occur on the sun occur in what we call 11-year solar cycles. And right now, we're coming out of a minimum. 2020 was the absolute minimum. It was a very, very low year in terms of the solar cycle. It was a very small amount of discharges from the sun in 2020. But we can look at a maximum coming in about 5 years, really 4 to 5 years. Let's say somewhere around 2025 or so, we can expect to be at a new solar maximum. And that is when we're certainly more likely to have a mass coronal discharge than, let's say, at a solar minimum. We know that's at play. But is there a 40-year cycle or a 50-year cycle? We're not sure. So I can say that we did have probably the second strongest solar eruption in 1921. And let's talk about what happened there. It was not as strong as 1859, but it did more damage because by 1921 we did have electronics, although it was tube electronics, which is much less susceptible to these type of problems than, let's say, semiconductor technology would be. But in 1921, that storm, although much smaller than 1859, it knocked out radio lines. It knocked out all types of telephone equipment. In fact, the telephone cable that went to England was blown up in 1921 during that geomagnetic storm. So it was already affecting our early type of electrical systems, our communication systems, telephone, electrical. Now, the electrical grid held up okay in 1921, which we did have. You know, we were electrifying part of the country by then. So, I mean, if we take 1859 to 1921, what do we come up with? We add those years, we come up with 1983. We did not have a storm in 1983, but we did have, you know, maybe the third strongest of the last couple of hundred years in 1989. And that one seemed to hit the northern hemisphere of the Americas. And if you remember, and a lot of people won't remember this, but the power grid of Quebec was completely knocked out during that solar storm. It was completely knocked out. And it's known as the March 1989 geomagnetic solar storm. And again, not as strong as 1921 and certainly not as strong as 1859, but we had more infrastructure and therefore there was more susceptibility.
Did we lose Bert?
No, I'm here. I'm pausing for
you
to reflect.
dropped out for a second. So okay. During that 1989 storm, that solar storm, if I remember correctly, people were trapped in elevators, and it was terrifying for them because they were trapped. The doors wouldn't open, the elevators wouldn't go up and down. Everything stopped. You couldn't buy anything, you know, in the affected area. Is that correct? That's how I remember it.
Oh yeah. Oh, there was a blackout. I mean, all the things that happen when you do not have electricity. I mean, you know, we know what happens. I mean, gas stations can't pump gas. Elevators stall. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people have backup power for sure, but all the things that happen when you lose electricity, it's funny when you think about things that you might not consider you wouldn't have if you lose power. Think again, because we depend on electricity for almost everything.
Okay, so the schedule is we don't know, but the last one was 1989, but the last big one was 1859. Okay, so when we look at electronics today, would you say that as electronics become more and more sophisticated, as the size of the semiconductors gets smaller and smaller, as the density population of the integrated circuits, chips, memory, etc., processors becomes more dense, those devices are more susceptible than the older devices, like the vacuum tube devices and the discrete transistor devices? Would you say that the newest and latest, greatest technology is more susceptible than the older technology?
Well, actually, Vince, probably not. Here's the interesting thing. Those electronics you're talking about, what they're more susceptible to is, sadly, a neutron bomb or some type of atomic blast or something akin to that. The solar storms don't seem, we don't think, to affect microelectronic circuitry the same way that type of event would, a neutron bomb or some type of atomic explosion. The microelectronics actually might survive. What's not going to survive is electrical equipment. It just seems we're talking about different types of frequencies, much lower frequencies, and much stronger but lower effects that brought down the Hydro-Quebec power system in 1989. So one of the susceptibilities is the transformers on the power system, where we're dependent on transformers transformers all along to convert the voltage. As you know, basically for long distance, you want to send very high voltages in many thousands of volts to overcome IR losses. Basic formula of electronics is the resistance, current, and voltage. So if you want to have less loss, use a higher voltage, which will overcome any resistance. But the transformers that are utilized, we have a very finite supply and very limited suppliers. And one thing we could do, and some scientists have been warning about this, is build a reserve of those transformers. So when this storm does hit, we'll be able to, as soon as possible, replace those transformers, which we feel are one of the most vulnerable pieces in the electrical system.
Okay, my understanding is that we don't make many of those transformers, and each transformer at a power substation is unique, meaning it was designed for that exact location, that current rating, etc., and there's only one of them, and that's the one that's being used right now. So if it gets destroyed, whether intentionally or through an act of nature, there is no replacement that is off the shelf. It has to be manufactured, and it could take years, depending on the supply chain. Is that correct?
So that's correct. That's absolutely correct. And, we look at all the money the government's spending now on God knows what. It would take just a tiny, tiny fraction. I mean, we're talking, maybe a few $100 million to purchase and supply a reserve of transformers and other electrical equipment that we would need.
Okay, so that's something that President Joe Biden could say. Well, let's we won't study the mating patterns of blue frogs anymore. We're gonna devote that to protecting the electrical grid infrastructure. And I think you should do that. Absolutely. Matt Stein, who's no longer with us, he's passed away, has been talking about this for about 10 years, how this kind of thing could happen. And for almost an insignificant amount of money, we could fix it. But for some reason, the utility companies, the government just doesn't seem to be interested. And I don't get it. We have a strategic oil reserve. We do. We have a nuclear stockpile. We've got weapons at the ready. We've got ships cruising around looking for something to blow up. But what we don't have is spare parts for our electrical grid. Please continue.
Yeah. So one other very interesting thing about what happened to Quebec, because you might ask, gee, is it that narrow that it only hit Quebec? Actually, it hit the whole northern hemisphere. But the reason this particular storm hit Quebec is it had something to do, we now believe, with the land of Quebec. And so when the solar current hit the Earth, they decided they enjoyed going over the high voltage lines of the power system more than going into the land, into the Earth, which is so interesting. It kind of reminds me of lightning. When lightning's looking for a path, it'll find whatever is the best path. Hopefully it's a lightning rod to take it off and keep it from going through your home. But something like that happened, and because of the land, the Earth that Quebec is, the currents didn't like it. But they go, hey, look at this power grid. Let's discharge through there. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why Quebec got hit, we think, more than other parts of the Americas. I find that fascinating.
And that was the question that I asked when you and I were at Marley Woods looking for UFOs. And there's this UFO hotspot in Missouri. And the question I asked was, what's with this spot? Is it the land? Is there a high concentration of iron or metallic material in this area that is causing the UFOs to like it? And what you're talking about is, I think, something similar, isn't it? Well,
we're talking about apples and Volkswagens here. We can discuss Marley Woods another time.
I know that, but I'm talking about the physics of why these balls of light like this particular area, and why the solar storm like the power lines versus didn't like the earth in Quebec.
Yeah. Something to do with what's under the earth for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that explains why
we're not prepared.
Now, will the next storm have similar attributes? We don't know.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we are flat out not prepared. Is that correct?
Nowhere near prepared enough.
Okay. And when we come back, will you have time to address what we can individually do? But assuming that the grid goes down, 99.9% of people aren't going to have electricity. But is there something we can do to protect what we do have? We'll be right back with Bert Bertonis. And Bert, I have a quick question. It seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that these solar storms do not directly harm people. I mean, not instantaneously when this storm hits us. Is that correct?
We have no evidence that they hurt people, but we're only learning about what are the effects of EMF on human beings. But everything it looks like, data we collected from 1921 storm, for instance, seems to be people were fine. Although the 1921 storm, I think, let's not discount that one. Do you know that caused hundreds of fires throughout United States and Europe because we had more telegraph and telephone lines at that time. So literally, the currents were causing electrical explosions in the telephone switching circuits and setting telephone central offices on fire. This didn't happen once or twice. It happened many, many times. I mean, think about if this happened today, the news that it would make. I mean, literally, flames engulfed a railroad switching station in New York City. And it was, I mean, you can look up the newspapers and see this. So, but yes, Vince, it seems like these frequencies, these waves, these currents, people seem to be okay. But you certainly don't want, to have this number of fires, which is, so you should always be fire preparedness. But we can talk if you want about how to be electrical preparedness in your home.
Please do that in the remaining time we have.
Yeah. So I mean, learn and this could have to do with earthquakes or fires or anything. Learn how you can make your home self-sufficient, at least in a temporary short-term basis, if the electrical system goes down. And that can be, first of all, if possible, put surge protectors in all your circuits going to your house. And, master surge protectors in your panel and then surge protectors all around different rooms. But having a battery backup system, I think, is a good thing. And I'm looking at putting one in my home. And, for nothing else, that electrical costs are lower at night and you can save money, but really for just short-term backup of power. So you can do that. There's other measures that you can take to help your home if you lose power. How I know you have a very elaborate system how you've wired your house, and you can certainly prioritize which circuits will stay active supplying power if you lose electricity. And Vince, do you have a battery backup for your solar panels?
Yeah, I do. We have a massive battery bank for the solar panel, or for the solar system, and then we have another one that I use to ride out the short-term interruptions, which I'm calling a whole house UPS. So I took roughly a 1,000-watt UPS system, uninterruptible power, and I have outlets throughout the house, including in the studio, that I use to protect the electronics. So there's many levels of electrical protection. We have whole house surge protector. Then we have each subpanel has surge protection at the subpanel level. Then we have surge protection at the use level. And we have uninterruptible power, which has additional surge protection. So many levels. But I had a question for two quick questions. One is for those who have underground power rather than power lines, bringing power to their houses and so forth. Ours is underground. If there is a solar event like we had before, will the underground conduit, with the cables, the 240 volt cables running through it, will that attenuate over distance that solar pulse? Will it attenuate it to ground, or is it no different from having above ground wiring?
If it's shielded conduit, I think it'll help.
Okay, next question. Automobiles, trucks, light trucks, and cars, electric cars, gas-powered cars, diesel-powered cars. Today, they all have computers, many computers. Even if they're not electric vehicles, they've got lots of computers. Do you think that the vehicles will succumb to an EMP? Do you think they'll just stop dead in their tracks?
Well, an EMP from an atomic blast will hurt them, but coronal mass ejection is what we're talking about, and cars should be okay. Cars in 1921 were okay. Of course, they didn't have computers. But
right.
But Vince, can I just sum up and say, we were going to touch on climate change, and we'll do that another time. But this is something I think we need to be much more aware of and concerned about, at least right now, than climate change on the planet.
Okay. So in summary, one of the biggest threats that we have is a coronal mass ejection solar storm, as in 1859, 1929, 1989, that had significant devastating results. So that's one of the top priorities as you see it. I see it as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, let me know when you'd like to come back on, and we'll make room and time. Your broadcasts are always informative, educational, and worthwhile. Bert, thanks so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. Class, we'll see you on Monday.
Thank you.